miniatures. Today, I am talking to Jessica Orrick, who runs the Office of Collecting and Design Museum in Vegas, Nevada. We'll talk about this unique mini museum and her plans to take it on the road. Jessica is on Instagram at office.of.collecting. Let's go talk to Jessica. Hello, Jessica. I'm so glad to be talking to you today.
Hi, Becky. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited. I'm excited to talk to you about your unique museum, the Office of Collecting and Design in Vegas. Tell us a little bit about this unique and whimsical little place you have.
Absolutely. I describe it as a museum of miniature, lost, obsolete, forgotten objects. It's sort of the things that have settled to the bottom of the junk drawer in a lot of ways. It's things like lonely dominoes, wonky dice, lots of rickety dollhouse furniture.
Mini food. I saw a lot of mini food.
Yes, a ton of miniature food. It's a lot of things that are just, they're right on the edge of being useless, but are so charming when you see them all together. The whole museum is sort of like a nostalgia machine where you can just really be transported back to this magical world of childhood or just your imagination where all of these things exist together.
Now, not only do you have minis in it, but the museum itself is sort of miniature. It's not very big, is it?
It's quite small. It's less than 1,000 square feet. So it's quite tiny. But also the museum is very much hands-on. So there are hundreds and hundreds of drawers in the museum, and you're supposed to open all the drawers. And they're filled with all sorts of weird things. Like we have an entire drawer of just miniature cooking utensils. And we have an entire drawer of miniature construction supplies and miniature sporting goods and all the things you can think of.
I would never leave.
Yeah.
Now, everything is so beautifully displayed and just so interesting on the walls. Are the drawers as heavily curated?
Yes, I call it an installation. It's not technically a museum. Technically, it's just an art gallery, and the entire space is my installation. So the whole thing is very much about the aesthetic of it and about the sort of tactility of it and the experience of it, as opposed to just look at these objects. It's very much about creating an entire aesthetic and an entire atmosphere.
I love that. I love the idea of hundreds of drawers to open.
Yes.
It reminds me, there was this fantastic display at the Denver Art Museum where they had this Spanish painter's desk that kids could open all the drawers and there were clues in there and a safe. And it was just so intriguing and just so charming. I just think what a sense of discovery everyone must feel.
Yes, the sense of discovery is really important. A sense of wonder, a sense of curiosity. We often get described as like an escape room without any of the stress, or sometimes an immersive experience for introverts, both of which I like a lot.
That's funny because a lot of the miniature community is full of introverts. Not me,
yes,
obviously, but there are a lot of wonderful introverts out there. And when did you get the idea to do this? And how long have you had your museum, your art gallery?
Yeah, well, so the museum has been around for about 3.5 years. And before I ran the museum, I was a stop motion animator. So a lot of the collections were seeded as props and sets for animations. And then when we had lived overseas for several years. So when we moved back to the States, I was really excited to have an entire studio with everything at my fingertips. But then I started thinking about it. I had worked at a museum for many years, and I decided that I actually thought it would be very cool to have a museum of all my weird stuff. And my friends and family all agreed that it would be a very strange place because I have such weird stuff. And so I opened it to the public about 3.5 years ago, and it now has completely taken over my life. I have no time to animate or do anything else, but I really love getting to share it. So it's worth it.
I feel like Vegas is a good place for sort of quirky little places like that.
I mean, yes and no. It is and it isn't. It's interesting. We get probably 85% of our visitors are from out of town because if you look up weird things to do in Vegas, there really isn't that much.
Oh,
so
okay.
We come up pretty high in the Google listings. So in that way, it's great because we get tons of people from out of town, people that are here for conferences that don't want to do Vegas type things. The sad part is we don't get a ton of return visitors because we don't have a ton of locals. So part of my motivation to get out and into the world is to be a part of communities that aren't just transient. I'll be the transient one passing through. I'll be able to come to them.
Yeah, so let's back up and explain that. So
yes,
you have a Kickstarter going right now, and you want to change it into basically a mobile exhibit where you cross the country or go on day trips or whatever.
Yes. So my plan is we're trying to raise money on Kickstarter and also, with brand partnerships and grants and investors, because it's quite an undertaking, but we'll be buying a 40-foot trailer and building the museum out as a traveling museum. So imagine traveling circuses of old. You roll up into town. I have a little pop-up tent where we will have events. And then the museum itself, which will be in the 40-foot trailer, will be open during the day. And then at night, we'll have these events in the pop-up tent. So it's a very ambitious project, but I'm really excited about the idea of connecting with communities that would never normally come to Vegas and getting to share this space all across North America.
And I love this idea too, because I can't tell you how many people write to me. I go to a lot of different miniature museums and shows, and people are like, there aren't any shows near me and I can't travel right now. And you can reach so many more people that way.
Yes, that's the plan. That's what I'm really hoping for.
So what kind of events will you have?
In the museum currently, we host a monthly poetry reading with local poets. This next week, we have a magic show, sort of sleight of hand. We do artist workshops. So we have artists come in from around the country and they teach, usually it's miniature making. We do, all sorts of stuff. We've done tiny little concerts, all sorts of weird little art programs and just community-based.
I love the idea that you could go and have a local miniaturist do like a pop-up sale and a pop-up class and do that with it.
I really am looking forward to getting to collaborate with people and meet all sorts of other miniaturists from around the U.S. And I can't wait.
Now, when you go to this museum, you said it's really interactive. One thing that I noticed on your Instagram is you are the queen of the flat lay. You have so many flat lays, and then when I asked you about it, you said that's actually an activity at the museum.
It is. You can book a flat lay experience where a visitor will come in. It's a 2-hour experience, and they get to curate their own selection of objects from the museum collections. And then I talk them through laying it out on a board, and then we bring it into the little photo studio, take a photo, and they go home with a tiny film print of their flat lay. And to me, it's the best way of sharing the museum. It's so personal and unique for each visitor. It ends up being somewhere in between play therapy and art practice. It's just really, it's really organic, really personal, really sort of intimate experience. And I love getting to share that with visitors.
So give me some tips on flat lay, because I've thrown things down a few times without thinking about it. But I was just really intrigued by yours. Tell me the first thing you would start with.
When I'm working with visitors, the first thing I talk about is the border. Because the final film print that they get is square, they're working with a square board. So I talk to them about, do you want your edges to be square? Do you want your edges to be asymmetrical? Do you want it to be a circle? Think about the shape of the final image. I talk to them also about negative space, because almost all of our flat lays we do on a black background, which really helps the colors pop, but also gives a very strong mood to the flat lay. So thinking about negative space, if you're not using black, what color are you using? Are you using white? How is that contrasting or complementing the objects that you have in your flat lay? How much space do you have between the objects? Are the objects themed, or are they just random based on your own preference? All of these things come into play when we're talking about doing a flat lay.
Do you start with the bigger items and then work the smaller ones in?
Yes, that is the number 2 rule, is start with the bigger stuff, because if you start with the little stuff, you won't have room for the bigger items. So always start with the bigger items, sort of balance out the way you want the flat lay to work with the bigger items, and then go in and fill in with the little ones.
And what is your inspiration? Do you do it by color? I've noticed you did one that was like about things about the summer. Tell me some of the themes and crazy categories you've done.
When I started doing this, I really was just taking photos of the collections. That was all I intended to do. So originally, almost all of my flat lays were themed just by collection, like miniature telephones or miniature tools or, miniature ice cream, whatever the collection was that I wanted to feature that day. I would take a photo just of that. But once I started introducing visitors into the mix, they got really into the idea of doing other mixes. So I have personally done a full rainbow, every color of the rainbow, just that, just white objects, just teal objects, just hot pink objects. But visitors take it really far. We've had a lot of people do birthday themes or wedding themes. We have people sometimes come in and make their wedding announcements as a flat lay or their engagement announcements or stuff like that.
How would you even do that? Give me an example.
There are a couple of different ways. Sometimes they'll do it collaboratively, but other times they'll pick objects for the other person. So, one partner will pick all the objects that represent things that they love about the other person. And so it ends up being this really personal, just really lovely portrait of each other that they make.
Oh, okay. So it's not necessarily like wedding themed stuff. It's just like might be their interest.
Yeah. It's sort of just couple themed stuff in terms of who they are as people.
Well, my son is getting married in October. So obviously I have all things wedding on the brain. And they're very creative. When they hear this, they're going to wish they had gone there.
Well, they're welcome to come. We get a ton of people for their honeymoon also. So, if they ever come to Vegas.
Wow. Okay. So can you think of like a crazy theme someone used or a really cool theme that someone used that has stuck with you?
One of the really early ones that I still love to this day was sort of like a Pandora Eve theme about like sort of mischievous women in history and in mythology.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't know. It was really great. She used a lot of doll hands, weapons, and all sorts of stuff to build out sort of this mythology of mischievous and probably smarter than their own good women. It was such a lovely flat lay.
Wow, I love that. And you told me about more of a younger person that just did like a little tiny circle and how cool that looked.
Although we don't allow kids in the museum, we do a traveling workshop where I bring several boxes of treasure from the museum and allow people of all ages to come and make flat lays with that material. He was probably 5 years old. We had a kid who, you're working with about 15 inches square, and he made a tiny little pile of objects in one corner of the board. He probably had 15 objects in this tiny little pile, and it was maybe 3 inches across. And I asked him, do you want me to zoom in on the pile, or do you want all this black space all the way around? And he said, oh no, I want the black space. I just loved that idea that he had built this entire collection, but really what was important to him was the negative space at 5 years old. I don't know. I was so surprised by that.
That is a very visually sophisticated 5-year-old.
Exactly.
I was trying to think like my kids at 5, like they might have pretty complicated themes, but I'm not sure they would have had that sophistication on the negative space.
Yeah.
Sorry, boys, if you're listening. I love you. It's not a criticism. Oh, that's so fascinating. These started out as things for your stop motion photography. So obviously you don't use puppets or things like that. So tell us why you collected these things for your stop motion photography and kind of how you use them.
So the stop motion that I do is all education based. I've made a couple of series for TED that are available online. A lot of the series I made that involved these miniatures and other objects were made for a children's network that is now defunct. And so they're not available. But that was originally what so much of the collections were meant for. It's all object-based animation. So I use objects to sort of represent information as opposed to a narrative with a character in it. Most of them are history-based or science-based. So I build a story out of the information and then use the objects to represent that information.
When did you start collecting all these objects?
Well, my parents say that I was collecting before I could speak. I've always just gathered things. The only collection that I have from my childhood that's in the museum is my collection of unplayable dice, which I've been collecting since I was 11 or so. And it's just a collection of dice that would never pass muster here in Vegas, essentially. I didn't grow up in Vegas. I didn't know anything about gambling. I just loved dice that were sort of off. So the corners are chipped, or the sides are uneven, or the pips are wonky, or just dice that wouldn't really work well in a game. Those were the ones that I really loved. I have thousands.
Thousands of them. Oh my gosh. So is there a whole drawer of dice?
There are 2 full cabinets of dice that are just filled. Yeah. And they're all labeled with where I got them, who I was with, when, all of the things.
I'm not sure at 11 if I would have appreciated like something that you love the fact that it couldn't be used for its purpose. What do you think that meant?
It helped that the first set that I found that was given to me, it was actually given to me by my aunt. They were from my great-grandmother. And they were tiny. I still have them. They're probably about 3/4 of a centimeter.
Oh my.
Tall. They're just adorable. And I think that's where it started, with the adorableness of it. But then as I started finding other dice, I realized that the ones I was interested in were the ones that were really unusual.
And do you still have those tiny, tiny dice from when you were 11?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, congratulations, because that's not easy to hold on to all those years.
It's true. It's true.
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Miniatures.com is celebrating a momentous milestone. 50 years of premium quality dollhouses and accessories, innovation, exceptional customer service, and a love for all things mini. This Friday, August 2nd, join the party with our Artisan Box giveaway. 5 lucky winners will win a box filled with artisan miniatures. Visit miniatures.com to learn more. And don't miss the 1974 collection, a collection of 70s inspired artisan miniatures and more. So besides tiny dice, what are your other favorite minis to collect?
Oh gosh, it's so hard to pick just one. I really love, they're all pretty irresistible to me. Ice cream is my favorite food. So I have lots of miniature ice creams.
I love ice cream.
Yeah, me too. How can you resist?
Right.
I have a lot of miniature fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Miniature food is a big one.
Oh, I love mini food. So where do you find all these things?
Well, so I refuse to buy things new.
Okay.
I only buy things that I can find at an estate sale or a thrift shop or get donated. Since we opened the museum, we started accepting donations. So we get a lot of donations, not just from people donating stuff that they don't want anymore, but also from artists, miniature artists all around the world will make stuff or just donate some of their work. So now I have a collection of stuff that is new. I didn't go out and purchase it. It's a real mix of things. The thing that attracts me to collecting, I think, is the hunt, the quest, going to these estate sales and going to these thrift shops and looking for the deal and looking for the one great item. But now with donations, it's sort of like Christmas every week. I just get to open these boxes from people of all these wonderful miniatures and objects from their childhood. And it's pretty magical.
That is magical. I love when I open the mailbox and there's like a tiny little envelope or box and I know it's mini mail. I'm like, ooh, it's so exciting.
It's so exciting.
It really is like Christmas every day.
Yeah.
So back to this hunt. You have such a variety that I'm sort of wondering when you go in, like somehow you have some criteria of, I want that, but I don't want this. Otherwise it would be even bigger. So do you think I need a little more mini kitchen stuff for this drawer? Or do you just walk by and whatever captures you? How do you not end up with nothing or everything?
That's a very good question. Unfortunately, very difficult to answer. The process for me is very intuitive. Part of the reason I don't order anything online or anything new is that for me, a lot of what I pay attention to with the objects is what I call a residue of attention. Sort of this idea that the object has witnessed all these things in its life, and it either has sort of a positive residue or a negative residue. And I only accept objects that have a positive residue. So it's sort of like, has it been afforded love in its life? And if it has, it's allowed in the museum. But I think you can really tell with an object sometimes. Like I have to hold it in my hand and know whether it belongs in the museum or not. So I know that's not a very
No, that's interesting.
concise answer, but
I too much prefer to buy minis that I can pick up and touch.
Yeah.
And see. But how do you tell if it's loved or not loved? Give me an example of something you knew was loved or not loved.
It's a really
personal.
It sounds very woo-woo because a lot of it doesn't have to do with how it looks. A lot of it just has to do with sort of the way it feels when you hold it in your hand. It's funny, there's another museum here in Las Vegas called the Haunted Museum, which is all objects that essentially have a bad residue of attention.
Oh, that's funny. So you like the exact opposite.
Yes. Yeah. His museum is all about like objects that have been in the room when somebody was murdered or was used by some serial killer. These objects that just have like sort of a bad vibe. And mine is just the opposite, but it's a vibe. So I don't know how you measure it. You can't really quantify it. You just have to know it.
That's interesting. I bet he has a lot of creepy doll heads.
Yeah, I think he does.
And clowns.
Yes, definitely. Both of those things.
Wow. So what's the last miniature you made yourself?
Actually, I just posted this morning about a miniature stethoscope that I had made. I had found a little tiny piece of metal in the parking lot at the museum, and it was just sort of a very particular shape. And I was like, this looks exactly like one side of the stethoscope. I have to make this into a tiny stethoscope. And so I used some heat shrink tubing and a grommet, and I just made it into the cutest little stethoscope. I'm very proud of it. It's really adorable.
Oh, I can't wait to see it. I'll have to look. You know, that's one of the things I really enjoyed about once I started making and collecting miniatures is that you'll just be going through your junk drawer or walking through a store, and all of a sudden you'll be like, oh, I'm not throwing away that top to the makeup. I'm going to use that as a planter or a side table base.
Exactly.
Or I'm going to turn it upside down and make it into a lamp. You know, I love that.
Yes, I do too. I love the reuse of it, the sort of looking at the world in a novel way and seeing things with fresh eyes, to me, is part of the real magic of the museum.
And I think it keeps your brain sort of alive and flexible.
That's a great way of thinking about it.
Like parkour for the brain. Or Pilates for the brain. I don't know.
Yes. I love that. I love that. I like to think that I'm doing parkour in my brain.
Yes, exactly, because I'll never do it with my body.
Exactly, me neither.
No, but I think you can get set in thinking of things a certain way, and I think miniatures do make you look at things a different way.
It's a great skill, I think, to be able to reimagine things.
I think so, too. I think it is. So I love this idea of actually hundreds of drawers. So how much time do you spend, like, curating? Like, are the drawers sectioned off like a printer's tray?
Some of them are. Some of them are not. You know, I often will find a collection specifically for a drawer. So I'll find a drawer that's a specific size and I'll think, oh, well, this collection will fit there. Or I'll find a drawer with lots of little compartments and I'll think, oh, well, this will work to organize, you know, the buttons or whatever it is that I have that I'm looking for a home for. And things move around in the museum. The museum is constantly evolving. So a collection will grow beyond its drawer capacity and I'll have to rearrange and rethink how it's displayed and something else will go in that drawer. It's a constant, I don't want to call it a battle, but it's a constant doing.
So are the drawers in like one huge piece of furniture?
I have lots of different things with drawers. Like I said, I don't buy anything new, but I'm constantly on the hunt for tiny things with drawers. So I have large cabinets which have thin drawers. I have tiny cabinets which have big drawers. It runs the gamut. We have a lot of like jewelry box size drawers. You know, we do have a couple printer tray drawers, specimen drawers.
Okay, you're going to have to share some pictures of these drawers because they're all curated, right?
Yes.
So here's my question. I can barely keep my 3 doll houses looking neat and tidy. I do a reel. I know I'm a little messy. I got a little ADD. You know, I moved the cake out of the way and put the egg. I mean, all 3 of them are never in perfect condition. How do you keep hundreds of drawers in artistic order?
It's not really as hard as you'd think. I mean, there's certain drawers that I have to sort of neaten regularly, but most of the drawers keep track of themselves. Most of the drawers they're divided like doll hands, doll arms, doll fingers, and they have little divisions and they stay in order. But every once in a while, I have to take, like, we have a drawer of tiny boxes. So I have to take that drawer out and reorganize it because people really like to go through that drawer and see all the different boxes. And there is sort of a certain way you have to put them back to get them to all fit neatly. So that one I have to redo, but mostly they take care of themselves.
I need a house like that will take care of itself. I want one of those. Well, I'm just thinking because you let people take things out, and touch them and stuff. So I guess most people put them back.
No. So the one rule at the museum is that you are not allowed to put anything back yourself. Even if you think you know where it goes, I have to put it back because I am the crazy librarian with the Dewey Decimal System that exists only in my head. And there's so many times when people put things away, they're like, oh no, I know where this goes. And I watch them put it in the wrong place. So for me, it's really like, I know where everything goes. And I'm a real stickler about it. If people take things out, they have to leave them out and then I put them away.
I feel like we could write a book about you, but like add a magical element. Like there's a magical drawer that takes you to Narnia or something.
I love that idea. For years, I've had this idea about a TV show that takes place in the museum.
Oh, yes. Yes. What happens when you get, what happens in the drawers overnight or something like that?
Well, like that each drawer takes you to a different place, a different type of place. So maybe someday I'll get there. But for now, it's still just, it's an everyday type of magic.
Yes, but it's still magic.
It is. It really is.
So tell me a little about, you said you started collecting when you were a little girl.
I collected lots of things. I really love bugs. So I collected a lot of dead insects. My poor parents, my sister, was such a girly girl. She loved pink and she loved jewelry and stuff. And I would steal her jewelry boxes and just fill them with, dead cockroaches or dead wasps or like any dead insect that I could find.
Please tell me there's not a drawer of dead insects.
No, there is not. But we do have some dead insects, but they're not just randomly in a drawer. They're in bottles. So.
Okay. Did you have a dollhouse?
We did have a dollhouse in my sister's room. I never played with dolls or a dollhouse. My mom really didn't believe, she really thought Barbies were not good things for little girls. So we never really had dolls, but I loved collecting doll stuff. So when I was, I don't remember how old I was, but when I was still pretty young, I got a stuffed rabbit that I would make clothes for, and I built her a little house, made pictures for her wall and everything, but she wasn't technically a doll. She was just a stuffed rabbit. The important stuff for me wasn't the rabbit. It was all the accompanying, accoutrement of tiny things.
That is so interesting because my mom didn't want me to have dolls when I was really little. She thought girls just wanted dolls because they were given dolls and that if they were encouraged to play with other things, they would. And, it was a part of, making sure that I knew that I could do something other than be a wife and mother. And, I grew up to be an attorney. So obviously there was something to that. But apparently when I was little, I did not agree with this. And I would always ask for a doll. And when I was 3, I had an operation and I asked for a doll and my dad just couldn't stand it. And he went out and got me a doll. And that was my first doll. I guess I knew when to pull the heartstrings, huh?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I haven't met anyone else whose mom felt that way.
I feel like it was a real sort of a feminist idea that dolls were propagating the wrong ideas in young girls.
And now I feel it's a little different that people feel dolls are okay, but people will give dolls to their sons or doll houses. And, let's face it, action figures are dolls, right?
It's true. It's absolutely true.
Yeah. So that's changed a little. I feel like now it's more like, well, let's let boys have dolls too. Although I think there's still a little stigma there. I don't know. That'd be interesting to ask people.
I don't have any kids, so I'm not clued into that to that world. But I think you're right. I think things are shifting.
Yeah, well, my boys are 24 and 28. But I do remember at one point, my younger son really grabbed onto a Barbie for a couple days, and then people made fun of him, and he got really upset, and he flushed it down the toilet.
No.
Which caused a lot of plumbing problems.
Yes, I can imagine.
So that's why I remember it so vividly.
Yes.
Barbie doesn't fit well down a toilet, just in case anyone's interested.
No kidding.
Yeah, but he did have fun helping Grandpa fix it, oddly enough, and he is now an engineer.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, I don't know how that story came out. So, changing all this from this museum to a 40-foot trailer?
Yeah, 40-foot trailer. So like a normal semi-size.
And part of why you're leaving is that your space will no longer be available. Am I right?
Well, so the building was bought by Clark County, and I think they have good ideas of what they want to do with it, but the building is in really terrible condition. So they're either going to have to close it to renovate it and replace the roof and add sprinklers and redo the plumbing system, or they're going to just tear it down and rebuild something new. So even though we don't know the future of the building for sure, because they know they're going to have to change it and close it for at least a time being, they won't let anybody renew their leases. And my lease is already up. So I'm just going month to month right now, which is very stressful because if anything were to go wrong, I essentially have no rights as a tenant. And it's not the sort of space that you can just pack up overnight and move. I mean, I literally have tens of thousands of tiny objects that are very fragile and would need to be individually wrapped. And it's very daunting to think about.
How long is it going to take you to pack that place up?
It took me 7 months to build it out. So I imagine maybe not quite that long, but it'll take me a long time to build out the trailer. And then, part of building out the trailer will be figuring out how to keep these objects safe while we're going overground, which is a whole new challenge that I'll have to figure out.
Oh, right, because you have a lot on the walls now. And that won't be as easy in a trailer.
Well, also you can't really, it's hard to hang stuff on walls, like especially a printer's tray that has stuff in it. As soon as you go over a single bump, everything falls out. So,
oh my.
Yeah, trying to figure out how to create displays that allow objects to still be removable, because it's very important to me that we can still use the space for making flat lays, but that will keep them in place while we're traveling. There are all sorts of limitations to building out something mobile.
So do you have a design?
I have a design in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very bad at representational art, so I'm having a really hard time expressing what's in my head onto paper, but it is planned out in my head. And it's just a matter of figuring out how to get it onto paper.
Right. And all those drawers, I just think of everything like rattling around.
Yes. The plan is actually just to line all the drawers with felt. Most of the things in drawers are not very fragile.
Okay.
So the idea is just to keep things from getting severely damaged. I'm sure there will be things that I did not think about that when we pull up to our first location, I'll be like, wow, well, those are all broken now. But I'm hopeful it won't be too much.
Wow. And so do you know where you're going to have your base? In a perfect world, when would you start with your traveling circus of miniatures?
That's a very good question. So my husband and I have been married 10 years, and the entire time that we've been together, his job has told us where we have to live. But he just went fully remote like 2 months ago. And so for the first time since we've been married, we have to decide where we want to live. And I have to say, we don't agree on anything. we cannot agree. So we are still deciding where our home base will be. But the plan is to have the museum ready to roll in summer of 2025. Because we both agreed that we don't want to spend another summer in Vegas. So by next summer, we will not only have decided where we want to live, but also have a mobile museum to take to where we're going.
That's so interesting because when my husband and I were working and stuff, there was no remote work.
Right.
So we never got to say, where do you want to live just based on that?
Yeah, we are very different and have different interests. So it's, he wants mountains where he can snowboard, and I want art museums and culture, and it's like there's not a lot of overlap.
Yeah, Denver has that. I used to live there. They have both.
Denver's on the list for sure.
Yes, although the thought of driving that trailer up a mountain,
Yes.
I don't know if anyone's been to Denver, but when I first moved there, you're going up the highway and you're going up these mountains, and there's these little signs that say runaway truck. What do they say?
Yeah, the runaway truck ramps.
Right. And they're basically these ramps where if the trucks lose their brakes from braking too much as they go up and down, they just go up this huge ramp and hopefully they reach the end of it and don't roll back down. And I just found that terrifying.
Yes. I know a lot about these ramps because it was one of my worst fears. Because I have always wanted to be a long haul trucker.
No.
But I was so, it's another one of the motivations behind me wanting to take this museum on the road. But the thing that scared me the most was those truck ramps. And so actually somebody explained it to me, and they're made of really deep, loose gravel so that once you start down that path, it's really hard to get the truck back out. I mean, it's not hard to get the truck back out, but your truck's not going to roll backwards.
Up. It's always up.
Right. It's always up. But the thing is, like, you sink into the gravel. You sink down into the gravel. You don't roll back easily.
Oh, that makes me feel better. It's so interesting that you always wanted to be a long distance truck driver, and now you could drive around with these little cool collections.
Two dreams coming together. It's perfect.
So where do you hope to be a year from now in your project?
I hope to be on the road. If we go to the West Coast, then West Coast will be our first tour. If we move to the East Coast, I'll probably do something in the middle of the country. It really just depends on where we end up finding a home base. But this time next year, my plan, 100%, more than my plan, I will be on the road with my mobile museum somewhere in America.
And we will have to do a live on that day.
That sounds great.
That would be so fun. So when do you think you'll get the truck up and running?
Well, it'll sort of depend on the Kickstarter because the money that we raise there will either allow me to go a little bit faster or I'll have to go a little bit slower. So depending on that, my hope is to be out of my space by the end of the year. So right now we're only taking appointments through the end of October. And then, if we have to stay longer, we will, but I don't want to promise that we'll be there and then not be there. But the plan is to be out and fully into the truck by the end of the year. It's very ambitious. It's a very ambitious goal.
Yes. And I also want to see pictures as you start to pack up because I can't even imagine individually wrapping all those thousands of pieces. It's sort of making my brain hurt right now.
I will definitely be posting throughout the entire process because I'm sure it's going to be an adventure. It's going to be a great adventure.
Well, I think that's great. And it's been so fun talking to you.
As with you.
And I just think you have such a unique take on miniatures. And I just love the idea that people can come in that don't have miniature collections or that do and just interact with them and feel that joy.
Thank you. It has been such delight to get to share with adults that also love miniatures, even if they don't collect them. They're really irresistible. So it's been so fun.
They really are. There's something about them that just grabs your heart and squeezes it.
Exactly. I'm so grateful to have been here and gotten to talk to you about it.
That's great. It's been our pleasure. And I just can't wait to see what you do in the future.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
You bet. Bye-bye.
I hope you enjoyed talking to Jessica as much as I did. And if you did, and you have the time or inclination to leave a review wherever you listen to your podcast or comment on it on my Instagram, I would really appreciate it. The podcast is growing, and it's thanks to listeners like you. My next podcast drops Tuesday, August 20th, and features Esther from Esther's Miniatures. She'll give us the inside scoop on how she makes those fabulous mini Tiffany lamps and more. Until then, remember, there are no rules in your dollhouse except those you create for yourself. Goodbye.